and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Jamie Rudd is an award-winning creative director who has spent 20 years in the creative industry. Jamie has worked in various agencies across multiple disciplines, always with one goal in mind, to bring creative solutions that have substance and focus. Jamie is the co-founder of the SoulKind Journal, along with his friend Chris Boulton. After meeting in 2016, Jamie and Chris soon realized they had the same passion for design, photography, and storytelling. They understood that they were kindred spirits who both yearned for a creative project without client restraints outside of their day jobs, which led them to something that would fuel their desire for creativity and something personal that could showcase their combined skills. After many meetings, the idea for an independent magazine began to emerge, and the SoulKind Journal was born. Jamie is a lover of the outdoors, an inquiring mind who enjoys spreading positivity, and an enthusiast of a healthy balance and love of food and dogs. Jamie Rudd, what an honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Hey, thanks. And thanks for the intro. It's quite good when you hear it all written back and said back to you, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. We tell this to every one of our guests. I've said this multiple times on the show. If at any point in this interview you want me to read it again, just let me know and I will be more than happy to read it again. You can hear it again.
Hey, you carry on as many times as you want.
That's great. You say that SoulKind is a magazine, and I feel like saying SoulKind is a magazine is like saying McLaren is a car, like a Formula One McLaren is a car. It's quite different than a normal magazine the way people think of it. What an amazing and beautiful project you guys have created.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it. Yeah, and it's an interesting one because we started out in the what's known as the indie magazine arena, so it's sort of dubbed immediately a magazine, but people quickly said to us, wow, this isn't a magazine, this is more of a book, and so I don't know, I think when it's because SoulKind started as a passion project, when it becomes a commercial entity or a business, you have to start looking at it slightly differently, and what sells? Is it a book or is it a magazine, or do people still buy magazines? There's all of those little nuances that you have to sort of iron out. But the conclusion that we've come to is that it's a printed journal, and SoulKind is evolved into a storytelling platform.
Well, it's very interesting and very well done. I was so happy to be introduced to it through one of our mutual friends, Jay Worthy. We've had him on our podcast, and I know that you've been on his podcast, 28 Summers, and I think I found you from a post that he made. And so I'm really grateful to him that we were able to hook up and I was able to purchase the journals. They're absolutely amazing. Before we get into, the journal and how that became a thing, let's talk about you. What was it like growing up in the UK for you?
I've always loved being in the UK. Yeah, I like to travel as well. Don't get me wrong, but I grew up in a place that is called the Cotswolds. I don't know if you know it. I don't know if you guys out there have heard of it, but it's a kind of idyllic countryside that the rolling hills. If you ever got a postcard from rural England, typically you'd have a Cotswold stone cottage with red roses outside, and it's typically very English, and it's nice. So you kind of grow up with, well, I grew up with the great outdoors on my doorstep, and lived a pretty active, happy childhood, I suppose.
Wow. When did you become interested in graphic design?
Do you know what? I think it's always been in me. It's always been one of these things that I wasn't very good at school. I didn't like school, and I kind of knew from early days I'd never be an academic as such. But I was always interested in art and being creative, and if it wasn't for sport and art, I don't know where I'd be. But I think studying art at A level and throughout school, and then kind of moving into art college to study fine art and really get to the nitty gritty of like how to be a creative mind, sort of led me down the path of graphic design. It's one of those old adages, you'll never make money from being an artist, so what are you going to do, kind of thing, and I think graphic design was I suppose at the time, the natural progression from being an artist and being creative to to putting that on paper and making money from it, And back then, not that I'm old, I'm only 45, but back then computers in graphic design were a fairly new thing. So you'd use your art skills as a graphic designer, whereas nowadays, you're straight to Mac, and the industry's changed a lot.
Yeah, interesting. That was going to be one of my questions for you, is how had the industry evolved over time? I would assume the same thing, that everything would move way more towards like electronics.
Yeah, I think the thing is, for me, like, everything's moving quickly, isn't it? Technology's taken over, and everything to a degree is driven by technology, and the kind of design industry's no different to that. When I got to university, which was about, I don't know, 90, I think it was 95. We had a computer suite, and you'd have that for maybe one lesson a week, and it was kind of right, you can all get on an Apple Mac, and these were the early Apple Macintoshes. But I guess technology's now changed the industry to the point where I think designers maybe think differently, or it's a lot quicker. There's a lot more demand for an idea, whereas I think back in the 90s, you had time to craft an idea before you even went to a computer. It was done. There was a lot of thinking, and we were always taught about the process of design and creative rather than the outcome being the thing that you start with. I think a lot of designers now will go straight to the Mac and start trying to create something, whereas we were always taught to put pen to paper and craft an idea first.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That must be interesting to see new people come into the industry without that same background that you have. I'm sure the level of quality in the work is quite different.
It's I think the key word is different, and it's an evolution, right? It's not right or wrong. It's just, I guess that was the way we were taught to do it, and that's what I knew. Whereas I think graphic design. I mean, I don't even know if graphic design as a course still exists now, because media kind of took over, and you have to be multidisciplined within graphic design, whereas we would almost hone it down the other way into a niche of what sort of graphic design you were into, and I kind of went through college as studying typography to a degree. So that's, understanding letter form and how to make type and actually create your own type styles. Whereas now, everything's digitized, isn't it? So it's all done for you. So yeah, it's different, but design's design, isn't it? At the end of the day, if it's in your blood, and I think it is in my blood, I still get excited by it, and I'm excited by seeing design and designers with a passion for doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that shines in people's work when people care about it and they have a kind of desire and a built-in interest for it. That's when you see the best work,
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. We mentioned in the intro that you and Chris met up in 2016. What was that like?
Yeah, I think it was around about 2016, something like that. I mean, I run a little brand agency in Cheltenham here in the Cotswolds, and Chris was sort of establishing himself then. It's quite late in his career, really, as a photographer, and he put out a marketing email. And the story goes, I can't remember it entirely, but the story goes that he sent out about 100 emails, and I was the only one that replied.
Wow.
And I know, and it shows the power of marketing, right? But or not the power. But so I agreed to meet him for a coffee. And we just kind of got together. We were kind of kindred spirits a little bit, and one thing led to another. And I worked with a lot of photographers through my brand consultancy. So I started to use him for a couple of jobs, and he's a really talented photographer who potentially didn't believe in himself that much at the beginning. Which is another reason why we were kindred spirits, because I think a lot of creators have this this kind of I'm not good enough thing going on in their head, and he had it as well as a photographer. And I think it sort of putting your vulnerabilities on the table, you know, and I think we're all learning. And as a photographer, you know, he just showed that passion, and I think that shows in his work.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I want to definitely talk more about him. It wasn't immediately you knew you wanted to collaborate with each other. That just kind of came about organically, I guess.
Yeah, I think it was organically, really. I mean, yeah, it's called Impostor Syndrome, isn't it? Where you don't believe in your own abilities, and it's yeah. When we got together, that I think I was going through a stage with my business where I wanted it to change a little bit. I wanted to take on new clients, or I needed the spark again. You know, I was working every hour God gave me because it was my own business, and I think. And it goes back to this speed and technology thing. You know, the demand is higher now, so you have to work harder and faster, and everybody wants things yesterday. So I think I was maybe on my way to burnout. I don't know, but at the time I was thinking I needed an outlet to spark my creativity again. And in my head, I'd sort of thought maybe there was a little side project of a magazine of some description. You know, the indie mag culture was quite a big growing thing, and I've always been an advocate of print, so it sort of made sense for me to put my kind of talents and into that, because that's what I was good at, that's what I knew. And you know, Chris was coming along from, you know, he owned a printing company before he started to become a photographer, so he knew about print, and he was into print as well. So yeah, we just got chatting really about let's do something together and utilize our own skill sets. You know, mine as a designer and his is a budding photographer.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it definitely does sound like you guys were kindred spirits. Maybe this is the point in the story where we have to mention, you know, you said that you're only 45 and not that old, which is true, but you almost didn't make it to 45. Can you tell us what happened to you in, I believe it was the summer of 2018?
Yes, it was 2019. And yeah, in July, and I was due to be taking a much needed break from work, so we'd arranged to go on holiday to see our friends out in Nova Scotia. We were going that day, so I've got two dogs which I took up to the kennels where they were staying. About, I don't know, half an hour drive up into the hills, and you know, a drive I'd done, God, I don't know, hundreds of times, and for whatever reason, I came back from dropping them off a different route, and I came down the main road back into town. And just as I was entering the last bend to come into town, a car came the other way and took their eye off the road for whatever reason. Let's not get into that, but essentially drove into my lane and hit me head on at 50 mile an hour. So we had a near 100 mile an hour head-on collision, which essentially turned my life upside down. I broke my neck in two places, broke my back, both legs, left arm, 5 ribs, punctured lung. You name it, I pretty much did it, mate.
Wow. Is it difficult for you to talk about to this day?
Yes and no. I mean, it's I haven't done it for a while. I've spoken about it for a while, so doing something like this, it kind of brings it flooding back, but it's definitely getting easier. I think I can't remember. I was on a podcast maybe it was a year or so ago, and I suppose if I listened to that now, I'd probably talk about it in a slightly different way. It was a lot more raw back then, you know.
Wow. And I've heard you mention that 2 people ended up pulling over and essentially saving your life. Is that correct?
Man, yeah. So there was a kind of a few events that happened that morning. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. I remember, I remember it clear as day. It was a really nice summer that year. I don't know what it was like over there, but it was 2019 was just one of them bonkers hot summers, you know, and it was a warm morning, and yeah, basically there was a guy driving into town and a guy driving out of town who essentially jumped out of their vehicles and ran over to my car, which was an absolute mess. I don't know if you've seen pictures of it, but it was a kind of crushed, smouldering mess. And they jumped into the car, and one of them jumped into the passenger seat and held my head up, whilst the other one jumped into the back and helped him to stop because obviously, because I'd broken my neck, I was slumped over and it was blocking my airways. So if they hadn't have done that, then they would have remained blocked, and that would have been me, lights out, you know.
Wow.
So two absolute heroes, mate, that genuinely did save my life. Yeah.
Wow. Please tell me you have bought each of them a pint by now.
I have. Yeah. They've they're still in my life, you know, and they probably will be forever. You know, they'll always be. They'll always be there.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. What was the recovery process like? I mean, how, even with them jumping in, you know, and saving your life, how close did it get? I'm assuming there were multiple surgeries afterwards?
Yeah. I mean, it took, once the services arrived, the fire brigade took 3.5 hours to cut me out. And I was drifting in and out of consciousness throughout that period. But, you know, for the most, I remember it. And then I was too poorly to go in the air ambulance, you know, the helicopter. So they took me on the road and they operated straight away on me just to stabilize me. I think at the time I had which is one of the other events, I had a blood clot on my spine, which kind of formed and stopped my spine from severing, which essentially stopped me from being paralyzed. So I think, I mean, I don't know exactly, because obviously I wasn't in the best shape to remember then, but they gave me some drugs, knocked me out, and they worked on me in the ambulance, stabilized me, and then the next thing I know, I'm waking up, maybe even a day or so later, in ICU in the nearest town, in a place called Bristol, which is where the kind of big proper hospitals are. Woke up in the intensive care unit after a 12-hour operation to fix and stabilize my neck fractures and remove the clot and sew me back up. And then I mean, there was multiple surgeries from there on in, you know, because I smashed up my legs, and I think over the space of about 2 or 3 days they were operating on me, but they couldn't do it all at once because there was so much to do, you know.
Yeah. Wow. So I know you physically have mostly recovered. What are you still dealing with today?
I'm still in recovery, mate. Coming up to 4 years on, intense physio on a daily basis. I've had some pretty hefty complications on my left leg, which got crushed. Wow. So although I've still got the leg, it needs a lot of work, and it's had a lot of surgery on it to get it to where it is now. So yeah, I'm 2 hours a day in physio.
Wow.
And trying to work my way through each day, slowly but surely.
Wow.
That's all you can do, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I mean, anybody, you know, who has put in that situation, like that's your situation now. You have to accept it and do the best you can every day. We're talking about like the physical recovery. Tell me a little bit about the mental, emotional, kind of spiritual recovery. How did that change your life?
I think it's a big question, you know. I definitely wasn't ready for the impact it would have. I think anybody, you know, I've had this conversation obviously a lot of times, but physically you can deal with it because, you know, whether you've broken both your legs or one of your legs, or, you know, whatever you've broken physically, you can see it, you can feel it, and you get over it, you know. And everybody would do the same as fight or flight. It's human nature to just dig deep and work your way through it, you know. But I think, especially with so many injuries that I had, the mental side of it's hidden, and it's you can't measure it. And I think I probably, and I don't know whether this is a natural thing that we do anyway as well, but I think I dismissed it, you know, because I was so hell-bent on focusing on getting myself physically better that mentally I just don't think I gave myself the time to understand it. So I had, and I think I still have got PTSD. I'm working through it, but one of the things we do with PTSD is we put it to the back of our mind, and we try and tell ourselves that everything's okay when it's not. And I think I have become more spiritual to a degree. You know, I'm very much into trying to figure it out myself, as much as I've had therapy and I've relied on therapy to help me get through certain parts of the journey. I'm acutely aware that, you know, the buck stops with me, and even if you go and see a therapist, there's no magic button to press to make everything all right again, you know. So again, it's a little bit like the physical side of things, you know. It's a slow process, and I think you've got to allow yourself the time to just take it gently and day by day, you know. And that's where I'm at 4 years on, you know. And I don't know whether that'll be another year, another 10 years, or that'll be life. It's just one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Just the patience that must teach you when you know you want to be in a certain place, physically, mentally, emotionally, and any of those levels. You know, it must be testing for you, but we really appreciate your honesty and authenticity, and you know, for taking us there. That must be difficult to recount, and obviously something that is very much on your mind every single day. But again, we're so grateful for you for sharing that. I think that's an important message to share with the listeners. I'm assuming, just based on timing, if that was 2019, work had already begun on SoulKind. Is that correct?
No, it hadn't. I mean, so me and Chris had met kind of previous to that year, with an idea of a magazine, or no, let's not call it a magazine, of a journal. And there was a couple of ideas floating around, but for me, we hadn't really concreted what that was. You know, there was, because the indie magazine culture's so populated now. What you need to do is find yourself a niche, and we didn't have our niche. We didn't really know what it was that would make something stand out. And there was, you know, there's a lot of magazines doing the same thing, and we just couldn't quite pinpoint it. And then I remember lying in the intensive care unit, and obviously I'm unable to move, so I've spent a long time looking at the ceiling tiles, and genuinely counted the ceiling tiles in my room however many times. And I remember one night being in a pretty low point, you know, like, because I was on morphine for however long it was at that point, maybe a week in post accident. I was heavily on morphine, and I was having morphine nightmares, and they can go one of two ways. They can be incredibly visual, or they can be incredibly dark. And mine had become very dark, you know, to the point where you just question everything so much that it puts you in a pretty bad place. And I remember waking up after a really kind of tormenting night, and thinking to myself, I need help to get through what I'm going through, and I'm going to need more help, because this is just the beginning, kind of thing. And I started to think about other people that had been through similar things, and how it was encouraging to read other people's stories, you know, that had overcome trauma, that had come through these difficult times, and how did they do it, and how did they feel afterwards, and what can we learn from these people to get ourselves over our own hurdles. So specifically for me, this thing about overcoming trauma and kind of thriving again in life became quite powerful, because it took me to a place that I needed to be. It got me through these really difficult times. And I remember specific stories. There was a guy, an American guy actually, called Matt Long. I don't know if you've heard of him, but
no.
He's a guy from New York, and he was injured in just before 9/11, or it might have been, was it post 9/11? It was around the same time, and essentially there was a bus strike in New York, and he got run over by a double-decker bus whilst he was on his way to work. He was a firefighter, he was training to be I think he was training for an Ironman. He was a triathlete, and this bus that had taken a new route because there were strikes on didn't know the route properly, and it knocked him off his bike and it crushed him. And he was in a really bad place. And I read his book, and it just inspired me, mate. To know that somebody else had kind of been through such a trauma and had overcome it. They'd overcome adversity, and although it took time and patience, they learned to live again with what they were given. And so Matt Long did that for me, and then a couple of other people that I read their stories, and I thought, actually, there's something in this that it helps me, it can help other people, and that sort of became the grounding idea for SoulKind.
Wow. Tell the listener a little bit about kind of the concept of the journal, what they can expect when they order it, how many stories you captured, who are the people, and how did you find them?
So the concept behind it, off the back of that as an idea, was that we didn't want it all to be about overcoming adversity and trauma, because, that could become quite a dark magazine. So we kind of opened it up to being stories or tales of human endeavor, resilience, and exploration. And within those three categories, it sort of broadens it out to many more people and many more stories. And so as a premise, we kind of went online and we did a bit of research, and we found a load of people that had cool stories, that were doing, extraordinary things that could inspire others. And we had this big long list of them. And essentially at the beginning, we didn't know whether this was going to be a thing or not. So we just kind of threw them and just to see what would stick, kind of thing, And people started saying yes, yeah, I'd love to be in it. I'd love you to write my story. So it got to a point where we thought, shit, we're going to have to do this now, because we've started the journey, but also people are into it. People want us to tell their stories, and the more we researched and the more we approached people, the more they said yes. So what can people expect? They can expect 9 contributors per issue. We're working on issue 3 at the moment, and within each issue, we've got 9 contributors with an incredible story to tell. And as long as it fits into those categories of resilience, exploration, and endeavor, we've had everything from adventurers to a homeless guy that fell into gang culture and kind of turned his life on its head and now inspires young children not to do the same. We've had your man out in Salt Lake, James Lawrence, who's the Iron Cowboy, who ran 50 Ironmans in 50 states of America, but he's just gone on to do the 100, which in itself is just insane, isn't it? It's a story that you just want to read about, and many more. There's many more and many more to come, mate.
That's great. You guys capture my favorite kind of people. And, James Lawrence is probably one of the more famous ones that you capture. I think a lot of people, especially around here, kind of know him and know his incredible story. And yeah, I mean, to do 50 Ironmans in 50 days in 50 states, just logistically, let alone, physically demanding, is absolutely ludicrous to me. I cannot believe he's able to do what he does. But you capture stories from people who are also not necessarily household names. And they may be adventurers, but some of them are not like, climbing up Everest or doing incredible feats. They're just contributing to the world in their own little way and making a difference, maybe not for millions of people, but they're making a difference in the world. I love that you were able to capture those characters.
Yeah. And they're the people we go after. And ironically, they're harder to find, but they're there. And their stories are so worth telling. And I mean, it's what we do is we try and find the people. There's a healthy balance. You need, when it goes back to being a business, you need you need the kind of higher profile people with the followers that can influence, that can help us expand what we're doing. But ultimately, we're looking for normal people. These are just normal people essentially doing extraordinary things. And I wanted to break down this stigma of these people being on a pedestal, because they're no different to me or you or anyone else. And, I'm just writing a story now about a girl called Purusha Gordon, who's worth looking up. And last summer, she rowed across the Pacific Ocean in the Great Pacific Race. And she's a mum of two that lives up the road in Tetbury in the Cotswolds. And, she's the same as any other mum. She's suffered with postnatal depression. After her two children, she's just a day-to-day girl. And one of the things she said is that she just wants to show that it's never too late. And if you put your mind to it, you can do something, even if you think you're not worthy. Like, we're all worthy of it. It's just a case of figuring out what the thing is. And, she's just a mum of two boys that thought she'd like to give it a go. And this summer, a team of four, they rowed across the Pacific Ocean. Not only that, they broke the world record and they smashed it by about 30 days. So,
wow.
So these stories are just, they are normal people, mate. You're absolutely right. And that's, we go after them. We hunt them down and we go after them. And it's great to find them because it inspires you. It inspires me. I write the magazine, so writing their stories is inspiration. It's cathartic in its own way.
Yeah, I love that. I love that it is really, really well done storytelling. I love that it's a lot of the interview and, they're contributing maybe half of it, but you're also telling the backstory and telling it so well. You're a very good writer. And I think this is maybe a good time to talk about Chris and his talent. I mean,
can we talk about me a little bit more?
Absolutely. So let's talk about you. The two just go hand in hand, the amazing writing with the photography. It was interesting to hear you say that Chris kind of had a bit of imposter syndrome when he was getting started, because I mean, his talent level is amazing.
Yeah. But the thing for me is that because we both genuinely do have imposter syndrome. I mean, I've been doing what I do for 25 years. You think I would have figured it out by now, but I don't know whether it's an intrinsic part of a creative brain. I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know. But all I know is that what overshadows the imposter syndrome is when you have a genuine passion for the thing you do. And if you love what you do, and I think it shows, and that's no different in Chris's work. It shows what he cares and he loves what he does, and it shows in his work. And he has a knack of just capturing something in a shot. And the thing is, he's not unique in that sense. A lot of photographers have the same ability. But what is unique is that he seems to capture something that is almost his trademark. It's almost that X, Generation X thing, isn't it? Not Generation X, but that X factor that you can't put your finger on what it is, but you just know it's the Chris Boulton shot.
Yeah, you can see it in the faces of the people that he takes the photography for, but it's in the eyes. Like, you can see all of these people, like the wisdom and kindness is directly in their eyes. You can see it in the corner of their eyes. It's unmistakable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, one of the first stories we did was a guy called David Lemon, who's on the front of the first magazine. And essentially this is where SoulKind originated from, in that we'd heard about this guy who was house sitting literally about 10 miles up the road. And he'd walked the length of the Zambezi River when he was in his 70s. I think it was to celebrate his 70th year. So he decided to walk the length of the Zambezi River, and it had never been recorded before. So essentially it hadn't been done. And so we thought, wow, that's a pretty cool story. Let's go and meet this guy. And whilst we were doing a photo shoot with him, Chris got really in his face with his lens, and he said, right, I want you to look into my camera, and I'm going to look into your soul. And because I was in the background, I was just something triggered in my brain. And I was, first of all, I thought, mate, that's a bit upfront, isn't it? You only just met the guy. But then there was a little bit of me that thought, there's really something in this looking into the soul, and and this idea that the eyes are the windows to our soul, and they can't lie. Whatever's going on, you can see it in people's eyes, and it's super powerful. So that shot, when it came back out of the camera and I saw it the next day, I was just like, wow, there's something about it, and it's super powerful. And we call that the soul shot. But after that shoot, we went for a beer at a local pub just to chill out and then address what we'd just done. And I'd written SoulKind because I liked this idea of this shot looking into the soul, but all of these people being kind people and a type of person. So I wrote SoulKind on this beer mat, and I fed it to Chris across the table, and I said, "What do you think of that?" And SoulKind was born as an idea, and the soul shot's something that we make sure we take with every single contributor.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And having seen the pictures, it doesn't surprise me that he was looking for their soul, and he certainly captures that. I don't often buy things like this on a whim. And that's, I think, the first thing that drew me in was seeing that initial cover was what you can see a soul. That's a great way to say it. I love that he put it that way. And yeah, again, that's what totally drew me in and made me, need to own these things. You've already told a few stories. Are there others that really stand out that you guys have been able to capture?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. I mean, for me personally, one of the other major stories was a guy called Aaron Baker, who so he had he was a MotoGP guy. He's one of your guys over there, and he was pretty good at what he did, and he's climbing up to a pretty decent level at MotoGP, and he was just practicing one day, and he took a jump, and he miscalculated the jump. He went over the handlebars and he broke his neck, and unfortunately he was taken to hospital, and he was deemed paraplegic straight away because it was such a brutal crack on his neck, and basically his story goes, and I don't want to cut his story short, but essentially he taught himself to walk again. And he did a great documentary on Amazon called, I can't remember what it's called. He walked across Death Valley, 200 miles, is it, across Death Valley? Would that make sense? Something like that?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's big.
He basically taught himself to walk again after 10 years or so, and ended up walking across Death Valley with on it like solo with a push cart to stabilize him. Just an insane story of overcoming tragedy and turning the life around and learning to live with what you got. But he's also an incredibly deep thinker and a super inspiring guy. And when I'd left hospital, I was lying I had a hospital bed in my own lounge, and a friend came over from Canada. And it was the first time. It was the guys we were supposed to be going out to see. So as you can imagine, it was quite an emotional reunion, and it touches me now to think of it. But a couple of days into it, she said, "You've got to watch this documentary." So we all sat there and we watched it. Well, I was in my hospital bed, and I couldn't walk at this point. I didn't know if I'd ever walk again. And I'm in this hospital bed in my lounge, and I watched Aaron's documentary. And I just thought, shit, I've got to get him in SoulKind. This guy's inspired me to walk again. And so I sent him a message, and he replied saying, yeah, I'd love to be in it. That would be great. So now all of a sudden I've got James Lawrence, the Iron Cowboy in Salt Lake City, and Aaron Baker, who I thought lived in Utah. So I said to Chris, we've got to make it happen. Let's just go to Utah. And so we flew, we booked flights and we flew out there, and but it turned out that Aaron didn't actually live in Utah. He lived in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. So we had to turn it into a bit of a road trip. But there was a significant moment for me where I was stood in this guy's garage in the Hollywood Hills after seeing his documentary in my own hospital bed, and I'm on my 2 feet and he stood next to me on his 2 feet, and it's special, mate. It's as simple as that. It was a special moment, and it will be with me forever.
Wow. I love that story. That's amazing. I was going to ask you if you could give a few examples of stories that really directly impacted you. And I think that's such a wonderful example of that.
It's
Tell,
probably the one.
yeah, yeah, it sure sounds like it. I mean, that must have been very emotional, I would think, for both of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. That's
It was,
amazing.
but the thing, not to take away from anyone else that's been in the two journals, that they've all got incredible, inspiring stories in their own right. And the thing is, not everybody will engage with every single story, but there's kind of something in it for everyone, and you can take a learning from each story. There'll just be a little nugget in each of these stories where you just trigger something in your mind and you think, yeah, I can resonate with that. So they're all incredible people, but evidently some of them are just more significant to me than others.
Yeah, sure. No, that's a great way to say it. I was curious about your trip to my backyard here in Utah. We have so many people from California moving to Utah, and our population is just exploding. So I want to hear the difference between California and Utah, and which one you like the most.
Oh, mate, Utah, hands down. Not taking anything from Cali. Loved it, but maybe it's a little bit like going to London here. It's great for a couple of days, but then it's good to leave. And there was something about Utah that was just magical. We went down to Zion National Park, and just something that puts you in your place. It's big. America's big, right? It's got big skies, and Utah's just, the sky goes on forever. We like for two creative guys from the UK, Chris is a photographer especially. I swear we were walking around Utah for 10 days with our jaw just on the floor, because everywhere you look's a photo opportunity, isn't it?
Totally. I often hate talking about how amazing Utah is on the podcast because I don't want more people to move here. I want them to go somewhere else like Colorado and keep this kind of more of a secret. But yeah, from where we are just in the outskirts of Salt Lake City, we've got several ski resorts within an hour's drive. Today it snowed a ton, and so it's a great day for people to ski, but it's also very quick to get down to deserts and, 5 different national parks, and just the contrast of all the different climate zones found in one place. It's really remarkable.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so after we went to we flew into Salt Lake City, and then we drove down. This is the other thing that's big, isn't it? We were like, well, we'll just nip down to see James Lawrence, who lives in Provo, but that was like 2 hours. So over here you're nearly halfway up the country in that. So after having the photo shoot with James Lawrence, we didn't have anywhere to stay, but we wanted to stay somewhere a little bit different out of the city. So we ended up going up to the mountains to Sundance, and stumbling across the Sundance Film Festival, and staying up in one of the lodges in the Sundance resort, which for me and Chris, growing up with the films and that, it was super cool to be up there in the mountains. We drove up to Park City, the ski resort?
Yep, that's right.
We went up there and had a go at that. Well, we didn't ski, but we just sat and had a beer and just, shot the breeze and saw the day through. But just beautiful up there. And then on our final day, having breakfast, none other than Mr. Redford walked in to have breakfast with his wife, which is apparently a really unheard of thing. So, we were super spoiled for sure.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's a really amazing place with so many different things to see and experience around here. We couldn't be happier, living here. Yeah, it's been cool to see both of the episode or issues, should I say? What would be the right way to say that?
We call them issues. We call it a journal, and we call them issues. I was always told throughout my career, don't use the word issues because it conjures up other meanings. But that's where we are, and that's what we're going to stick with. So, we call them SoulKind issues, and it's a printed journal.
Yeah. So with both of them out, would you, in your opinion, would you say that SoulKind is a success, and what makes you say that?
I think it's a raving success, yet not financially. So it depends how you define success. But for me, I said from day one, because I've been in the industry a long time, I know how difficult it is to make it financially viable. So I never measured SoulKind's success financially. I've always measured it as a rewarding thing to do, to find learnings and meet new people and open new doors and new avenues to doing different things in life. And to me, that has kept me focused throughout my rehabilitation. It continues to do so, and I'm continually inspired by the people we meet and the stories that we can tell and share to other people. So when somebody says, I've read your magazine or I've read your journal and I think it's amazing and I love the way you write, for me, that it still blows my mind. And that for me is success. It's self-funded. So ultimately we're struggling now because we've run out, we haven't got endless pockets of money to put into this. And it's not a cheap thing to do, especially when I start booking people in America to go and see. So we have to make it more financially viable. We're looking for investors at the moment. So if there's anybody in America that wants to invest, please get in touch, because I've always said I don't want money to be the barrier for this thing to work, because the power in it is about sharing and caring and learning from each other.
Yeah, I love that message. And I love your definition of success. And I love that you committed to doing it in print, at least for now. I'm sure it would have been a lot less expensive to do it in a different way or on different paper. It's really beautiful. It's beautiful to hold in your hand and read. Like, there's some things I can do digitally or listen to a book versus read a book, but this is extremely tactile, and it wouldn't be the same reading, the articles online or on a normal, kind of glossy paper magazine format. It's really a work of art. And so I'm sure that must not be very cheap to do, but I sure appreciate that you guys chose to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we're kind of, me especially, because I've been doing it for so long, but I'm a bit of a purist, and I've always had the passion for design. So I suppose it's testament that I might have done something right in 20 years of designing. But yeah, for me, it had to be printed. I think you nailed it with the word tactile, mate. It's good. I don't think print's going anywhere, despite technology being on its dramatic curve that it's on. I think print will always be there in the background, just doing its thing, and it's a good thing to have on your coffee table, But what we've realized, I think, recently is that SoulKind is actually, it sounds a bit cheesy, but somebody said to me at the beginning, what you're doing is actually creating a movement, not a magazine. And I sort of laughed at him at the time. It was about 4 pints of Guinness in. But it stuck with me, because actually what we've realized is SoulKind is a movement. And actually we're creating a storytelling platform. And on that platform, there's multiple channels to tell stories. So I'm not writing off that we might do a podcast maybe one day. There may be a YouTube channel. We've got a local film company that are working with us to create video assets at the moment. So for me, the printed journal's a beautiful part of SoulKind, but what we're trying to do is create a kind of storytelling brand that has multiple facets to it.
Wow.
I think that's it the best I can.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's maybe a good segue. I was going to ask, what things we could expect from SoulKind in the future. It sounds like you guys might branch out and do a lot of different mediums.
Yeah. I'm hoping for world domination first and foremost.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. Like I said, it's realizing now that actually SoulKind is not just about a printed magazine or journal. It's about being a storytelling platform. And the reason that came about was because I realized very, very soon on into doing issue 1 that we'd heard so many stories, and we could only get 9 into the magazine. So it meant that we had a load of a load of stories that were still worthy of telling and sharing, because everyone we talk to has a worthy story. So I just thought, what am I going to do with all these other stories? Because we haven't got the time or the funds to do 5 or 6 SoulKinds a year. So I thought, why not put them into a blog? So I started the SoulKind blog. So now I'm looking for writers to help with creating articles for the SoulKind blog, and that's opened up new doors of doing new things. So essentially, there's so many stories out there. We're finding ways to help share them, mate.
I love that you're being creative and finding new ways of sharing the message and getting more of those stories out. That's fantastic. Is there anything else we can expect from you personally in the future?
I'm going to keep going one day at a time, mate. I mean, I've got plans that are loose at the moment, but I've had to just keep my head down and focus on getting myself physically and mentally better. And I'm a lot further along that road now than I was obviously a couple of years ago. So I take one day at a time, and hopefully as I get stronger, things will start to happen. And ultimately I'll be out there doing some things and living life to the full.
I think it's just amazing advice for any of us. You have, almost lost your life, and to be able to, put it in perspective and just work on it day by day and just take it one step at a time is wonderful advice.
Life is not a dress rehearsal, and it goes in the blink of an eye. And when and it takes, I talk about a trigger a lot when I talk about my accident, but it normally takes some sort of trigger for people to realize how short and precious life is. So I think we all need to, and I don't, the thing is, you end up sounding like you're preaching, but it's not what it is. But I think we could all do with slowing down a little bit and just taking stock of what we've got, how lucky we are, how fortunate we are, and living the best day and life that we can.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful message. And hopefully it helps more of us appreciate life while we have it without having such a tragic and, traumatic event happen in some, people's personal lives. This has been an amazing conversation, Jamie. Where can people go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Straight away, you can go to soulkindpeople.co.uk. That's where you can buy the journal. And that's pretty much everything SoulKind. You can follow us on Instagram at SoulKindPeople, and you can find me within that. So I do the social media, and I maintain the website. So you'll find a link to my personal stuff. I don't tend to tell my story that much on my own personal social feeds in that respect, but SoulKind's the place to go and hunt for us, me and Chris for that matter.
That's great.
You find links to Chris's social feeds within the SoulKind People website as well.
That's great. We will make sure we link to that in the show notes. Jamie Rudd, thank you so very much for putting out such a wonderful piece of art. I highly, highly, highly encourage the listeners, please support Chris, support Jamie, go buy these journals. They're absolutely incredible. They're very beautiful. It would make an amazing gift, and they are very inspirational, and they do such a great job of storytelling and capturing that soul that you were talking about. So thank you so very much for your work, and thank you for taking the time to be on our show today. We are very grateful for you.
Casey, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.